So in the last class, we have discussed the inter-process communication. Right? Usually, there are two types of processes. One is independent process, and another one is cooperating process. As we have seen, the importance, the need of cooperating processes, why we need to have such kind of processes, even when some complexity is existing while handling cooperating process. Okay, so. The basic reason why we need to have the cooperating process is one root cause is information sharing and convenience and uh, modularity and computation speed. So because of these four parameters, because of implementing all these things, we need to have the cooperative process. Okay. So whereas the independent process are executed in an efficient way, but a lot of time, our intention is always we'll try to make our CPUs busy while executing a number of processes so that the throughput can be increased. So, as a part of it, implementing or as a part of making the CPUs busy, uh, we need to encourage the cooperating process also for sharing their information among the processes. Okay, so there are several approaches are there for implementing inter-process communication among those sockets, pipes, files, signal, shared memory, message queue. These are the some of the approaches through which we can implement inter-process communication. Among all these things, the shared memory and message passing systems are very efficient, and majority of the cases in our current environment people are using. Okay, so let us focus on shared memory. So shared memory concept is some dedicated memory is allocated for all the processes. Okay, so if process A wants to do something, it can place the information in it. Similarly, the process B can access it. In such a way, the common place can be accessed by both A and B. Okay. So in that case, what happens? Whatever the information that B wants to access from A, so A has to place that information in this shared memory. B will get an access to whatever the file that was shared by the process A. Okay. So in such a way, these two processes are able to communicate with each other by exchanging the information or whatever it will be. Right? So now let us have a look at about what is happening at shared memory systems. What are the different challenges that exist among the shared memory systems? Even we have discussed in the last class. Okay, so the memory communication is faster on shared memory model as compared to the message passing model on the same machine. Okay, that is the advantage of this shared memory model. And coming to the disadvantages, at any given point of time, only one process should write the information into the shared memory. Otherwise, what happens? In the database management systems, we are going to study about the transaction management, where you studied about the concurrency control and all. Okay, there, what is the need of what happens if multiple processes are trying to write the or read the information at the same time? What kind of problems that are exist? You might have studied in that concurrency control and all. But until then, you just remember that. Suppose let us assume that there is a variable called a, int a. Okay, if both the processes are trying to assign the value to a at the same time, what happens? Whoever is modifying the first, probably suppose the process one is assigned a value of 5 to the variable a, so that the value of a becomes 5. After that, if we write something on it, what happens in that case? Whatever the newly modified value is available, so that can be accessed. So here what I'm going to say is all the processes that use the shared memory model need to make sure that they are not writing to the same memory location. here our intention is what happens if they allow to write the information in the same memory location, one content will be overwritten with another. So there is a possibility of data loss. Okay, and another important drawback with the shared memory model is shared memory model may create problems such as synchronization. Who is going to access first, who is going to access second, and how we prevent the data loss and all. So memory protection that need to be addressed. So these two issues we are supposed to be addressed. So for understanding what is the problem with the shared memory model, let us discuss an example of producer-consumer example. It's a classic example for shared memory. So here there are two processes. One process is producing something and another process is consuming something. You just imagine one process is producing something. The job of the process one is always it has to produce some products. The job of the second process, whose name is consumer, who is going to consume, right? So here, what is happening with this shared memory concept with these processes, producer and consumer? Let us have a look at it. Okay, so the data, whatever the products that the producer produces will be placed in the shared memory. The consumer will access, the consumer process will access the data from the shared memory. You can call it as a buffer, where the producer will keep on information. The consumer will consume the information from the buffer itself. That is what happens. Okay, now let us see what is happening in this. The data is passed via an intermediate buffer, which may be either unbounded or bounded. Suppose if the memory space available is fixed length, for example, 1 GB, that is 1 GB, right? So how much of data is the producer is able to produce? Only the capacity, whatever the amount of information that it is able to produce. Whatever the amount means, only 1 GB of information will be is able to stored in the buffer by the producer. Okay. Once it was filled, what is the job of producer? It has to wait until the consumer consumes some of that information from it. Because the producer has produced 1 GB of data, now it is filled. There is no vacancy for placing the information. So until the consumer consumes something from it, the producer has to wait. Okay. If it is unbounded, that means there is no limitation for the memory storage. In that case, what happens? The producer need not wait even for single minute or single second while producing the information, because it need not consider the consumer's position, whether it is able to consume it or not. Is it ready or not? Okay, these kind of situations, it need not to be considered directly. Whatever the information that it want to produce, the same will be produced and it will be placed in the buffer itself. That is the two things which exist as far as concerned with the producer. Now coming to the consumer. What is the first case? Bounded. There is a fixed size. In that case, suppose if that fixed buffer is empty, from where the consumer has to consume the information? Nowhere, because it is empty. If the data is present in that buffer, the consumer is able to consume it. If it is empty, the consumer has to wait until the producer has produced some information, or whatever the buffer that it gets stored with some data. Right? That is one end. When coming to the unbounded, the consumer has to, he need not wait for anything. Directly, whatever the information is available in the buffer, directly it can access it. Suppose it is empty, again, anyway, it has to wait. Right? So these are the two different aspects which we need to be addressed, because in such a way, you need to implement a mechanism that will take care of making producer and consumer has to wait when the conditions are not satisfied. Suppose someone has asked you to develop a mechanism, how it could be handled the inter-process communication using shared memory concept, what you are supposed to think, you need to inquire about whether is there any fixed size buffer is available or not. If it is available, you need to address the problem. Like when the producer is going to produce the data, when the consumer is going to consume the data, like that you need to address these two challenges. Yeah, if it is the bounded buffer. If it is unbounded buffer, you cannot apply the same mechanism for unbounded, right? You need to modify it. So in such a way, you need to address the classic problem when you are handling the shared memory. Of course, I will show you the code execution of these problems at last, because we have a certain time limitation. So that is the reason, because we need to cover so many other important concepts also. Okay, so these examples, definitely I'll show you how it could be executed and how we are going to be solving the shared memory problems, whatever we have discussed here. Okay, these two problems which we have discussed, one is synchronization and memory protection. Another one is we need to allow only one process to write the information. I mean, the same memory location cannot be accessed by multiple processes. So you need to implement a mechanism to avoid the data loss. Okay, so we'll see later how we are going to be solve this producer consumer problem. Like that, we'll have so many other problems are also be there. So we'll discuss how to solve all these issues. Okay, that is about the shared memory. So what we understood from this is the entire process. Here our target is how do we implement or how do we allow two different processes to communicate with each other. That is inter-process communication. Okay, so the inter-process communication can be done with the help of shared memory. That means whatever the information that it was shared among these two processes will be placed in the some memory location, fixed, common memory location. Okay, where who is the owner of the data is going to place the information in that common location. Who is going to be access the data will access the data from that location. In such a way, we will implement the inter-process communication. There, what is the problems that are exist? Whether the memory, whatever the shared memory that is accessible by both processes are fixed in size or there is no limitation. So based on this, the mechanism has to be changed. Based on the memory position, will change the mechanism. So anyway, whenever if you are going to develop a mechanism for the inter-process communication using shared memory, you are supposed to be thinking this direction, right? So that is about shared memory. Now, another kind of mechanism through which one can implement the this inter-process communication is message passing system. So here, let us assume that two different, in the previous case, by accessing the common location, okay. So by accessing the common location, we are able to implement the inter-process communication. Now we'll see another kind of mechanism through which the two processes can share, or two processes are able to communicate with each other. Just like the communication that exists between the two systems. Just like your phone conversation, you are able to make a call to others, okay, so that a connection will be established between your phone and between you and the recipient. What way, how the information is going to be transferred. The similar way, here also, with this mechanism, we are able to allow two different processes to communicate with each other. Now let us see how it could be done. So here, I assume that the two different processes, P1 and P2, wants to communicate with each other. Okay. So in order to communicate with these two processes, what are the things that are required in message passing system is, first point is establish a communication link. Okay. So there should be a link by which they can share the information, because there is no connectivity, there is no channel. How do you reach from source to destination? So here, one important point I want to clear you is network. What is a network? A connection of a group of things. A connection that exists among the group of things through which they can share the, or they can share the information or whatever it may be among those group of people, right? In order to establish the network, what we require 5 different components. One is there should be a channel. There should be a channel through which they can exchange the information. Second one is the message, whatever the data that they want to share, that should exist. And third one is one sender should be there, one recipient should be there at least. Okay. And the fifth one is we need to follow certain rules. That is what we are called as a protocol. We need to have the protocol. We need to follow certain rules. So those rules are called as protocols. So these are the 5 essential things are required to establish a network. Okay. So keep it that point in your brain. Whenever if the 2 processes wants to share the information, the first one is there should be a communication link. If it is already exists, then fine. If it is not, you need to establish it again. Right? And then the sender is able to send the messages. Okay. So here the message and the destination, recipient address, or simply you can send the message. At the same time, the receiver, we should have a receiver, and the message should be received from where it was arrived. So these are the fundamental information that is required in the message passing system. Okay. So here, if the message size can be a fixed, suppose if you restrict both the processes to share only a fixed amount of a fixed size of message, in that case, so here are 2 variants, whether it may be a fixed size or the variable size. If it is fixed size, it is easy for the operating system, because so always the size is fixed, so that whatever the mechanism that you are going to implement as a OS designer, we can easily design what way the information is going to be transmitted over the network, right? Suppose if it is variable length, that means one block size is 1 GB and another block size will be, another message size will be 2 GB and another maybe 100 MB. Like that, each and every process may vary within size, so it becomes a difficult task for the operating system designer to handle it. So both the things, if it is fixed size, which will become easy for the OS designer and difficult for the programmer. If it is variable size, it can be easy for the, because he need to be focused on, the programmer is focused on how, what way the data is going to be transmitted, right? Whereas in case if it is fixed size, you need to be think about how do we make it as a number of blocks, what do it has to do if some block is not filled with complete data. So these are so many issues are exist. Okay, so if it is fixed size, it will be easy for OS designer and difficult for the programmer. If it is variable size, it will be easy for the programmer and it will be difficult for the OS designer. Okay, so that is who feels it easy or to whom it is difficult, that is different issue. You just understand how the message size plays one of the important role in message sharing system. Okay, so every message contains 2 different parts. One is header and another one is body. The header part is used for storing the message type, destination ID, source ID, message length, and control information. Control information means the control information, like what to do if out of the buffer space. So if the control, if the things are run beyond our scope, what it has to do, how it is going to be protect, or how it is going to be save our system from unexpected terminations or unexpected errors or unexpected malfunctions. So the control information part will contain to address all these kind of problems, like if it runs out of the buffer space, sequence number, because for each message will be assigned with a number. Suppose if there is no, the sequence number is not present in the message block, what it has to do, and priority. These kind of issues are what way it is going to be addressed. That information will be placed in the control information part. Right? Anyway, the body contains the message itself. So for every message, these two parts are, every message contains these two parts. So now let us focus on it, how the message passing system will allow the two processes to share the information. Okay. So message passing system must support the minimum system calls for sending message and receive message. To minimum of 2 system calls it need to be support, because it's suppose being a message, if I want to transmit the data, I need to make a call, system call. Like I want to transmit some message, so that others can understand. Okay, someone has to pass some information. Suppose if there is no such kind of facility, what way I can communicate? What way I can express my interest? It's not possible. Similarly, the receiver, to whom it is going to be received. So that is the reason it must support 2 minimum system calls called sending message and receive message, and the communication link, the link that was established between the sender and the receiver. Okay, that is very essential. And there are 3 key issues to be resolved in the message passing system. That is, whatever the communication link that you are using, whether it is direct or indirect communication, and the messages are passed in the synchronous or asynchronous way, or automatic or explicit buffering. Automatically, the size should be changed, message block size should be changed, or you need to implement some mechanism that could handle the message blocks. So these are the 3 different issues we are supposed to be addressed. So when coming to the first point, direct or indirect communication, that is what we are calling it as naming. Okay, with the direct communication, the sender must know the name of the receiver to which it wishes to send the message. Suppose out of as of now 67 participants are there in the class. Okay, suppose if I want to share something with a particular person, so what I have to do, I need to know to whom I am going to be communicating, to whom I am going to pass the information. So if I say, for example, 501, roll number 501. So what I can do, directly I'll call the 501 and I'll pass the information to 501. Okay. So in such a way, in the direct communication, the sender must know the name of the recipient. So here, what happens in this case? In the direct communication, there exists a one-to-one communication, one-to-one link between the sender and the receiver. And for symmetric communication, the receiver must also know the specific name of the sender from which it wishes to receive the message symmetrically. So we will follow the same process for both sending and the receiving. That is what we can call it as a symmetric communication. In that case, the recipient should be aware of the sender from which, who is the sender from which he is going to receive the data. Whereas in the asymmetric communication, it is not necessary, because it cannot be predict what is the name of the sender and all, because there is no same mechanism will be followed for the sending and receiving, right? This is about the direct communication. The direct communication, you can think that there is a one-to-one, face-to-face communication. See, in that case, what happens? A one-to-one communication. The sender is able to transmit the data directly to the recipient. Recipient has to understand from where it gets the information. Okay, these 2 issues you are supposed to be addressed in the direct communication. Whereas in the indirect communication, so there is no possibility of one-to-one contact. What happens in that case? Suppose if I want to pass some information to all of you, You just think how difficult it is to share that information in one-to-one fashion. I will call 501 and I will pass the information. Again, I need to make a call to the 502, I'll pass it. You just imagine how much time it took for passing the information to the 113 students. Instead of that, if you have any inner communication where you can share your information with the recipient is, here it uses the mailboxes or the ports. That means the multiple processes can share the same mailbox or a simple box. The same mailbox will be shared by the multiple processes. Only one process can read and give a message in mailbox. So whatever the shared message box, mailbox is there, okay, from that only one process can read the data at any given point. That means initially the process that creates the mailbox is the owner and is the only one allowed to read mail in the mailbox, although this privilege may be transferred. Okay, so whoever has created the first mailbox, he will act as the owner and he may transfer the privileges of accessing that mailbox to the others. Okay, and the operating system must provide some system calls to create and delete the mailbox and to send and receive messages to and from the mailboxes. So using mailboxes, we can implement the indirect communication. Okay, so you can create your mailbox where you can place some information and that can be transferred to the others. Right? Just like the broadcast messages. And second one is synchronization. Second issue that we are going to be addressed in the message passing system is synchronization. Either the sending or the receiving of the messages may be either blocking or non-blocking. Here you need to understand what is blocking and what is non-blocking. A process that is blocked is when we can say that the process is in blocked state means the process is waiting for some event such as a resource become available or the completion of an IO operation. Suppose in the life cycle itself, we understood while executing the process, suppose if the process requires the services of IO device, what CPU has to do, has done in that moment? Simply, it suspends the execution of the current process and it will be redirected to the IO devices. Probably at that moment, the IO device may be busy with some other task. So what the process has to do? It needs to wait in the particular device queue. Okay. Once its turn has come, it was allowed to process it. So here also, so whatever the waiting that you have done in order to get the services of that IO device or some other resource, it may not be IO device, whatever it may be the resource that you want to get it. Okay, so waiting for that is called as block. Right? If there is no such kind of situation, then you can think about it as a non-block. That means whenever you want, you just directly access it. Right? So inter-process communication is possible between the processes on computer as well as on the processes running on different computers. Via network, you are able to communicate with the process which is running in your current system and as well as the process which is currently being running in the some other system also. That is possible with the network distributed systems. So in both the cases, whether if you want to communicate or if you want to communicate with the processes that are running in the single system or in the different systems, the process may or may not be blocked while the sending message or attempting to receive a message. So message passing may be blocking or non-blocking. So blocking is considered as synchronous And blocking send means the sender will be blocked until the message is received by the receiver. Blocking send means once, so you have transmitted one message, okay, so you need to wait until that message will be received by the receiver. If you got the acknowledgement from the recipient, like, okay, I got whatever the message that we have transferred, like that, once you got the confirmation from the recipient, then you are allowed to transmit the second message. So such kind of, if the such kind of situation is exist, that is what we are calling it as blocking send. Similarly, blocking receive, right? So so non-blocking is considered as asynchronous. That means non-blocking send, as the sender sends the messages and continue, it need not wait for the acknowledgement from the recipient. Similarly, non-blocking receive has received the receiver receives the valid messages or null. Suppose whatever the message that it was received, it is correct, so that can be accessible. Otherwise, null. There is no acknowledgements or something like that. Whatever the valid messages are there are correct data, because there might be a possibility of corrupted your data while transmitting the network, right? Hope you understood or not. That means during this journey, probably some other data will be mixed with your data. That is what we are calling as data corruption. Okay, so in this non-blocking, so you can consider the asynchronous and non-blocking send and non-blocking receiver messages, right? So that is about the naming. What way we should have either the sending or the direct or indirect communication, right? So what way we are supposed to identify the sender and the receiver if you are using direct or indirect communication. Okay, next, buffering. That means the size. What are the limitations in the size, message size, right? Messages are passed via queues, which may have one of the three capacity configurations. One is zero capacity. Messages cannot be stored in the queue, so sender must block until the receiver accepts the messages. This is one kind of scenario. Another one is bounded capacity. Bounded capacity means there is a fixed size, right? So what happens if it is fixed size? Whatever the messages that are transmitted by the sender will be placed in that queue. Okay, if it is filled, the sender has to wait. Okay, until the receiver receives or reads all these messages from the queue, or at least some of the messages are read by the recipient, so that there exists a certain vacant space, so that it allows the sender to transmit the data further. That is what happening in the bounded capacity. Whereas unbounded capacity, the sender and the receiver need not wait for anything. Continuously, they can transmit the data. Because it is theoretically, we just assume that what happens if the unbounded capacity. But in the practical scenario, what way we can handle? Because if the capacity of the recipient is very low, whereas the capacity of the sender is very high. What happens in that case? The sender is continuously producing or continuously transmitting thousands of messages, but the receiver is able to receive only 100 messages per minute. What about the remaining? How to handle such kind of situation? So these things are supposed to be addressed, right? So that is about the message passing. Message sharing system. Okay, so these are the two different approaches which are popularly used in our current environment. Hope you are all clear. What is interprocess communication? If two processes wants to share or two processes wants to communicate one with another, we need to implement certain mechanism. There are several mechanisms are available. One is called pipes, sockets, signal, file, shared memory, and message passing. Among these two, the shared memory and message passing are the two beautiful concepts. Majority of the cases people are using. So in the shared memory concept, what happens? Some common memory location will be used by the processors to share the information. So there are two different kinds of problems we are supposed to be addressed. One is what happens if it is fixed in size, that is bounded and unbounded scenarios we need to be observed. And at the same time, how do we restrict the two processes cannot be accessible the same memory location. Okay, so these are the different challenges that exist in the shared memory system. And coming to the message passing system, where we can share the information with the help of a message queue. Okay, in that we need to be think about how do we pass the information. That is communication, direct or indirect communication. What way we can solve the queue size, buffering size, whether it is bounded or unbounded. What are the problems that exist with, if it is bounded, and what are the problems that exist if it is unbounded? So these two issues we need to be addressed as a designer of the operating system. Here you just think, you just imagine yourself, you are the person who is going to be develop a new operating system. So while implementing new operating system, you need to think in this direction, how do we solve these issues? Okay, of course, I'll show you some of the examples. How do we resolve all these things with the programming as a programming example, but not now. It is in the last, right? Now, let us look at about another important concept is communication in client-server system. Communication in client-server system. How do we implement this inter-process communication in the client-server environment? So before going to discuss about this, one should understand client-server environment. So you are all aware of that. You just imagine how do you access your Gmail? That is a best example for the client-server environment, where all your information will be stored in the server itself. Wherever you open your mail, wherever you means, either you may open your mail in the laboratory or in your mobiles or in your laptops. Whatever the place you try to open your email, you will get the information from the server itself. That means we'll keep all the information at a single place from which we can access our data, provided if you have internet connectivity. Right now, in such kind of environment, how do we implement this inter-process communication? Let us have a look at it. So here again, we'll use three different mechanisms: pipes and sockets. And another important one is remote procedure calls, RPCs. These are the three different mechanisms. By using this, we can implement the inter-process communication in the client-server environment. So now, let's first look at about the sockets. A socket is an endpoint for the communication. Is an endpoint for the communication. So two processes communicating over a network often use a pair of connected sockets as a communication channel. Right? That means we are one system, I mean the sender system and the recipient system. You just imagine two computers which are connected via network. Okay, so if system A wants to communicate with system B, that communication can be done with the help of socket. Socket is not a hardware component. Socket is a software. Okay, it is a software. If somebody asks you the question like whether the socket is a hardware or software, it is a software. Software means you need to implement a mechanism how your system is going to transmit the data and who is responsible for receiving the data at the receiving end. Right? Usually we'll use the port numbers to communicate between one and another. Right? So the two processes communicating over the network uses a pair of connected sockets as a communication channel. Right? So for example, if you have an user interface through which you want, suppose some CoWIN registration application will be here. For example, from today onwards, all of us has to register in the CoWIN website for getting the vaccination schedule, right? So where you just open the that particular UI, you need to enter your mobile number and click on the get OTP button for the registration process, right? If you receive the OTP, you can enter it so that it will open another one. So in all the cases, what happens? Whatever the data that you have entered will be communicating with the database of that application, from which it searches data and it acquires the information for you. For example, you have entered your data, okay, that need to be stored in the database itself, right? Whatever the user interface, that means from where you are operating, that is responsible for transmitting your information from your system, because the server, the CoWIN database is not present in your system. It was stored somewhere. So whatever the information that you have supplied here itself, that need to be transmitted to the database where the database is resides in a particular system. Okay. So in this case, what happens? The communication from your system to that particular system. So this communication is existing with the help of these sockets. So you can imagine in such a way. Similarly, the IP address, probably you may know about this IP address, Internet Protocol Address. IP stands for Internet Protocol Address. So this is the format of IP address, 192.168.1.7, something like that. You have entered IP address of the your Linux server where your C programs are available, C software is available, right? Like that, for every system in the network should be assigned with a number called IP address. By using it, it is able to communicate with other systems. Or by using this number, one can identify over the network who are you, right? So in such a way, this is the diagram which shows how this host is able to communicate with the web server. How it is going to be communicated? So whatever to whom it is going to be communicated, with that address, it can search on the network, and finally it reaches the destination where the destination socket address, whatever the address that it was specified. Fine. Here you can observe this is the IP address of the web server, 161.25.19.8, and at last you might have observed 80. Here itself 1625. This is called as port number. So this is the port number by using which the host is going to share the information. Okay, and this is the port number by using which in the receiving end the system is going to receive the information. Yeah, it is a system software itself. It is a system software. Okay, it is not application software. You cannot do anything. Of course, you can write the code by specifying the port numbers like that. By using the port numbers, you are able to implement the communication mechanism. So in the computer network itself, you write different kinds of programs, how we are going to implement the communication between one system and another system. One-to-one communication, one-to-many communication. Okay, in such a way you can implement the programs. But in all the cases, we'll use this internal socket by specifying the port numbers for the communication. Okay, here the port numbers below the 1024 are called as well-known ports. Well-known ports. So usually they are used for communicating internet services like FTP server, file transfer protocols, web servers, etc., etc. So here you can see the 80. 80 is 80, which is less than the 1024, which is used for communicating with the web server. If it is greater than 1024, that can be used by the operating system to respond to the system calls such as socket, system call or socket pair, like that. Different operating system has to respond to the system calls. For that purpose, the port numbers greater than 1024 are used. Okay, so general purpose user sockets are assigned unused ports over 1024 without. Okay, that is what we have. Now, here one important point that one should understand is the communication channels via socket is of two different forms. One is connection oriented and another one is connectionless. Connection oriented and connectionless. These 2 points, I mean, this entire process you will study in the computer networks subject. Okay, so for understanding how the information is going to be shared among these two, here the communication channel will be two types. One is connection oriented and another one is connectionless. Connection oriented means transmission control protocol, TCP protocol. There exists a dedicated path between the sender and the receiver. Dedicated path between the sender and the receiver. If you transmit the data via dedicated path, is called as connection oriented. If it is not, there is no dedicated path between connection sender and the recipient, such kind of communication is called as connectionless, where we are using user datagram protocols to transmit the data. Okay, so in the next class we will elaborately discuss about these two and the remaining topics. Okay, because right now, if you have any queries, you can ask.